Welcome to another Kundalini conversation. I'm your host, Brent Spirit, and my guest today is Craig Holliday. Craig, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time to share with us about Kundalini awakening.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So Craig's a spiritual teacher and a licensed professional counselor. Today he's coming to us from Durango, Colorado. Craig is also the author of 2 books, Fully Human, Fully Divine, and Yoga of Liberation. Craig offers weekly satsangs, meditation groups, as well as a Kundalini support group, along with retreats and workshops. Now, Craig, many of my listeners have expressed their appreciation for your work, particularly your compassionate wisdom towards those struggling with the Kundalini awakening process and, of course, the challenges. So this is a real honor for me as well, because I fall into that camp. You've helped me a lot with your Zoom meetings, with your YouTube videos. I was actually just listening to a guided meditation that you have on your YouTube channel leading up to our meeting today. And everything you share is it's very heartfelt and compassionate and genuine. And I'm really honored to see where our conversation goes today. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So I understand I've that, generally speaking, you're quite empty and don't like to plan and think. And I know you've shared your story elsewhere online in other interviews. You've got the Buddha at the Gas Pump interview, and you've got many talks online. So rather than asking you to give me a whole biography about your spiritual process and Kundalini awakening journey, if it's okay with you, I'll just hit you with some questions, and we'll see where our conversation goes. Okay, so on your YouTube channel, I think your most popular talk is, I think it's titled The Bliss and Nightmare of Kundalini Awakening, right? And I think that right there in the title captures what this experience can really be like. Blissful beyond words, but also nightmarish beyond words as well.
Yeah.
So in your experience, can you talk to us a little bit about the nightmare of your process? The reason for me conducting these interviews and these conversations is to extract the challenges that people face so others can relate and say, hey, I'm not the only one. And then also extract some value, which would be the solutions that you found. So what was your nightmare like? How did you manage that nightmare?
Yeah. Yeah. So I met my teacher when I was really young. Like I met my teacher when I was 18 or 19 years old. And when I said I have a teacher, it was very typical like guru disciple relationship. When I came to him actually looking for a job, and he just moved to town. He was building a retreat center, and I was going to help him build that. And so it was just like almost like a storybook love affair that I had with my teacher. But the thing that I noticed right away, like when I came into contact with him, is there was just something that like kind of woke up in my consciousness that said, like, oh boy. It was like a mix between like, oh boy and oh shit. Like, this is a huge powerhouse of a human being that I've come into relationship with. And I kind of realized that on the first day. And I was meditating since I was about 14 years old and having spiritual experiences. But I was just a young kid, and I met my teacher David. And after a couple of years of being with him, just the experience of being in my body was, let me say that differently. The experience of being in his company created tremendous pressure in my body. And, I knew that being with him, like we would meditate, often together. And, we would have I'd have like a 3-hour meditation and satsang with him. And it was just like me and him in the beginning. I just felt like being in a pressure cooker. And so like I kind of had like this like warm up to him where it was just like boom, like this is real, like this is big, this is huge. And I felt it in my body, and I felt it in my body when I was with him, but I also felt it in my body when, when I went home to my house, after work, and these things continued to cook in me and build in me. And there's just felt like this spiritual pressure was growing and growing and growing. And, a couple of years into it, it got really painful. Like at first it was like intense, but kind of cool. But then it was just like really painful because it brought up all my unconscious. It brought up all my fears. It felt like it was like literally pushing the very fabric of my consciousness in this expansive manner that was very uncomfortable. And so that was what we might call that. I don't like calling it a nightmare, but just to, play with that language, that might have been like the beginning of the nightmare. Now, keep in mind, I was so fortunate also to have a teacher. So saying it was a nightmare is a little, it's a little paradoxical, because I had this amazing teacher, like incredible guru, incredible enlightened being. And yet just being in his company was like being close to a bonfire. And, that's written about in a lot of the ancient Indian traditions. Like, like if you have a real guru, it's like being next to a bonfire, but eventually that bonfire consumes you. So if we get into, let's say, 4 years into our relationship, I started to feel immense pain in my back. And it was like really bad pain, like pain to the point of I'd be curled up in the fetal position and I would like cry every night because I was in so much pain. It was really making it hard for me to work, just hard for me to function in the world. And it would be like that, where it would be so painful. And then like I might sit down with my teacher and he just starts speaking to me. And then immediately it would just shift into bliss and euphoria. And so that was always like a funny thing for me, because I knew like at the root of this was a spiritual energy. Like the source of it was bliss and spaciousness and freedom. And yet it was almost like my body couldn't handle it. And there was so much resistance in it. And, so I was meditating every day. I was doing yoga, all kinds of spiritual practice, but I was also working really hard, like, building retreat houses and planting trees and making gardens, with my teacher, all these things. And I had this experience that was really quite schizophrenic, where it was ridiculous amounts of pain. And then in half a second, it would shift and be ridiculous amounts of bliss and euphoria. It really screwed with, just like the mind likes to label something like this is bad and I don't like it, but my mind couldn't do that. I knew that this was good. And I've always had a deep connection with God and a deep faith, but just purely from a human perspective, it was a ridiculous, horrific, grueling thing for just the physical mammal body to go through. I mean, I had headaches that were just, like I was being, like my head was being crushed and then my head was being expanded. Headaches that were just like so intense in the third eye, and then headaches in the back of the skull, behind the eyes. It's just like crazy headaches, crazy back pain. I had, insomnia where I couldn't sleep, and I grinded my teeth because my consciousness was in so much stress. And then one day, like I went to a healer, and I was going to all kinds of healers. And keep in mind, my teacher was an immense teacher. He was also an incredible healer. So I'd go to him for both teaching, meditation training. I was apprenticing with him, he was doing healing work with me. And sometimes he would just like, like I would be like, say, seated across from him, and he'd just take his hand and just go like this. And then my body would just like flow into kriyas. I would feel just incredible bliss. And it was wild. But like I could go on and on about all the crazy experiences I had, but I went and I saw a friend of mine. He did Thai massage, and what Thai massage is, it's not really massage. It's really like you're on like a yoga mat, and like he was just like stretching my body out is what Thai massage is. It's not, it's basically like someone stretching you and putting you in like yoga asanas. And as he did that, like something broke within the resistance. And all of a sudden, I started having these incredible seizures, but the seizures felt euphoric. Now, I can tell you, this scared the heck out of him. Like he was like grabbing his phone. This was back in the days of like when people had a real phone in their office. So he went to like grab the phone and call an ambulance. And I was like, no, 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 like don't do that. Like I was like, there's something happening here. And he's like, you know, he was basically like, yeah, there's something happening here. And I'm calling the ambulance. And I was like, no, there's something profound happening here. And my hands just started to move and dance. My spine started to arch. And I began to have just this massive kriya. And, you know, like that massive kriya that happened whenever that moment was, in a sense, is still flowing in me this day. But you know, that day, like I wasn't able to walk. Like he had to kind of like pick me up, and I felt like one of those newborn horses where you have to like, or it's having to like learn how to walk with his leg. But see, I had the biggest smile on my face. He turned pale because he was terrified that he broke my back or something. And you know, it was like just like the dam broke and something incredible happened. Now, it wasn't all just, you know, beautiful and blissful after that moment. You know, it still was kind of schizophrenic, going back and forth between immense pain and immense euphoria. But there were moments where, you know, like my hands didn't work. I couldn't like hold forks. Nobody could touch me, you know, because I would just go into like this just euphoric dance, and I'd have all these kriyas. Like it was so strange. You know, my family kind of forced me to go to a neurologist, and I went a bunch of times and spent all this money. And you know, and multiple neurologists were like, I've never seen anything like this. It's absolutely crazy. You know, one of them actually pulled me aside and I says, like, I think this is Kundalini, which I smiled and said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But you know, I mean, there were so many twists and turns in the journey, but it took me many years to kind of get my body functioning and operational again in a way that was just so I could just like show up and go to work. And I had young children at the time. You know, like the big shocking things were like I loved mountain biking. I couldn't ride a bike. You know, it just felt like worlds were opening and expanding within my consciousness, but to such a degree that it really confused my nervous system, because it was like I was living in multiple realities at the same time. So it took a long time for me to integrate that. And it consisted a lot of just laying on the earth, you know, under a big willow tree, watching the clouds flow by, visiting my teacher a lot, you know, just working bare minimum. And I mean, the nightmare, it went from physical pain to a non-functional body while trying to raise children, while making me broke, you know, because I couldn't work. And like it wiped big chunks of my memory and my past away. It was, but with me, the gift that I had is I had faith. I had a sense that this was ultimately good. I didn't go into fear, even though like huge realms of like existential fear arose in my consciousness. And I kind of just like rolled with it because I've just come into this lifetime with immense faith, and I had a great teacher. And then I had a number of teachers that I worked with to kind of support me on the journey. I could go on and on, but I might just stop there and just see if there's anything you want to say.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing about that. I think a lot of people will relate to the difficulty, but there's definitely a lot of gems of wisdom in what you just shared. In particular, you mentioned, and this was in the guided meditation actually that I just listened to by you prior to our meeting. You mentioned in the pain or through the pain, there's bliss and there's spaciousness.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that and how somebody in pain right now, because of their process, can begin to access that or entertain that idea?
Yeah. 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 That's actually a big question. So I had my main teacher, David, and he was just an incredible yogi. And so he's from like a South Indian yogic tradition. Um, and so the teachings in yoga, often we focus on energy, we focus on being open, we focus on, like the divine qualities within us. And so like that was like a huge training. Another teacher that I studied with, who wasn't local, but who I'd go and visit was Adyashanti. And so Adya, I developed, a little bit of a relationship with. I mean, he was hard to get a hold of because he's so popular, but, I'd go a lot on his retreats. And the thing that he taught and helped me open to was this immense spaciousness and peace. And so I was having, say, multiple awakenings simultaneously. And let me see if I can do the math. So I met Adya, maybe about 2 or 3 years before my Kundalini like really blasted open. And so the big thing that he was having me focus on is the non-dual realms of vastness and spaciousness. And the thing that is so helpful about that is with the yogic tradition, people tend to focus on energy, but then they get overwhelmed by energy. In the Buddhist tradition, we tend to focus on spaciousness. And if you have a tremendous amount of energy flowing through your system, it can be very helpful to first know I am space, and there is space here for all this energy to flow, for all this energy to empty out. Now, also one of the great gifts that Aja gave me was this realization of an absolute sanity. Like I am that which is awake and aware. I'm not the body. I'm not the experiences of the body. Like all this phenomena that comes and goes is just phenomena. Now, my teacher, David, he was also teaching me that, but it was just something that happened when I met Adya, when it was just like the language he used or his transmission, because that's the world that he lives in. It was just like that, where I had this massive awakening with Adya, which was, that was so incredible, just in its own right. Like that awakening, just that first awakening I had with Adya of realizing that my mind, like that my consciousness is the sky. That was enough for any human being just in one lifetime. But so I had that. And because I had that, it gave me almost like just this basic ground that I am okay. That I am okay. It's like space, you can't destroy space. You can't harm space. Now, most human beings that I work with on the path, they have this understanding, I am my ego. I mean, that's what almost everyone on planet Earth thinks. I am my ego. I am this limited sense of self. And then I have Kundalini waking up in a limited sense of self. And that's a very difficult journey because then we go into, I'm overwhelmed. I can't handle this. This is too much. This is going to kill me. And in a sense, all those are true. Like the ego that I am is overwhelmed. The ego that I am is dying. The ego that I am cannot handle this. And the fundamental mistake that everyone makes on the spiritual path is we try to walk the path from the perspective of the ego. Now, ever since I was a kid, I had this one thought in regards to spirituality is I want to be free. I want to be free. It was just like I was born with this. I just knew, like, this little human ego's psychology of Craig is not the truth. And so, like, my whole thing was I wanted to blast open into to know myself as this hugeness of being. And with my first teacher, David, I got all kinds of experiences of that. But when I met Adya, it was actually really funny. I was driving to meet Adya. I didn't even meet him yet, but I was just driving to meet him. And it was like just something happened. I was driving through this massive valley in Colorado, and it was just like my mind just exploded open and became the sky. And with it came this transmission of, like, it's okay. Everything is okay. It's okay. Everything's okay. And I no longer, thought of myself as just this body and this little human consciousness. And so when the Kundalini woke up within this context, it woke up in a context that was absolutely spacious and absolutely sane.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, we need that. Everyone needs that. The world needs that if we're going to stop killing each other, or if we're going to navigate a wild Kundalini experience. It's like we need to have this understanding that what's here is this vast, spacious, awake awareness that cannot be harmed, cannot be destroyed, cannot be defiled, that's already perfect and free. And just like in a real human and Kundalini perspective, there's room for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fundamental voice of the ego, like if you have a massive force that's waking up in you called Kundalini, the number one voice in the ego is there's not enough room for this. Like, just like in the most basic sense, it's like, there's not enough room. There's not enough room. And therefore I'm overwhelmed. And therefore I'm traumatized. And therefore, like, I'm just going to be a hot mess, because this is just like we feel like we're a victim of God if the Kundalini wakes up in an egoic context. Whereas when the Kundalini wakes up in a context that's awakening or free, like has a spacious freedom in it, so utterly healing. Like it's just, there's room for it. There's room for it. And we don't have to be so afraid of it. And so, I was speaking with Bonnie Greenwell, a number of years ago. We were both teaching at a conference, and we're kind of sharing notes. Like, her and I, like, we're friends and colleagues, and we used to share a lot of students. And, one of the things that, like, we really jived, with was, like, we both had the same teacher, Adya, and just the realization of vast, spacious awareness, like knowing oneself as that, creates just this environment of sanity and freedom for the Kundalini to flow. And the people who don't have this, they tend to get really nutty.
Right.
They tend to get just really nutty. Really nutty. And of course, like, awakening comes by the way of grace. But the thing that, I invite for all my students is to at least have the perspective, to at least be able to, like, feel into, like, say, for example, in this moment, that there is space here now. And in a sense, it's a little bit like a cosmic joke, because all of us, we are like fish, swimming around in the sea. Fish don't know, like, they don't understand that there's water there. And human beings are the same way, but, like, we don't know that there's space here. It's like, all we do is we focus on our thoughts, we focus on the objects in the room that we see. But most human beings don't realize that every object and every thought arises in a space of space. Like space is here always. But the way, like, the ego mind is wired is it's hardwired to notice thoughts instead of noticing space. When we notice space first, it's so healing for everything.
Right.
For everything. And I don't care if we're a trauma therapist or someone who's focusing on Kundalini. there's space for trauma. There's space for Kundalini. There's space for the craziness of the world. There's space for our neurotic mother or father or sister or brother. And when we know that, it just creates like this kind of Zen-like ground of sanity. And, that's a big part of my job as a teacher, is to provide a transmission of that sanity, when people are going through, a pretty intense wild ride.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is incredible, incredible insight. There's space for Kundalini.
There's space for
the
Kundalini.
experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
And even if we just like looked at it from logic, I'm not a logical person, but if we looked at it from logic, like nothing can arise unless there's space.
Right.
So like there has to be space here for Kundalini to come. And the thing that everyone does is when Kundalini comes, they're like, oh my God, like this is too much. I can't handle this. And they literally like pull themselves into their center. Like it's just like we have a massive contraction. Like that's what the ego does when it sees something bigger than itself that it doesn't understand, is we contract and pull everything to the center, whereas that's the opposite of what Kundalini wants. That's the opposite of what Kundalini needs. And that's what creates a tremendous amount of the nightmare for most human beings. It creates, so many symptoms arise not because of Kundalini, but because we contract in relationship to Kundalini. The Kundalini is just energy, but all these like crazy symptoms like headaches and insomnia and all this kind of thing, most of it arises because most of it's experienced because we contract around this massive force of awakening that's flowing through our consciousness.
That's gold. I think that's going to speak to a lot of people. It's speaking to me. It's a perspective that I haven't considered, that the difficulty around Kundalini awakening comes when we contract around it, that there's space.
Yeah, that's the
simple.
primary thing right there, is
Right.
if we contract, you're going to suffer greatly.
Right.
Now, I'll tell you this. Of course, Kundalini, when it wakes up, you're going to have a lot of wild experiences and feelings and this and that, like the same way when we go through puberty, or if like we're pregnant, like the body's going to go through lots of changes. But like the difference between like if you fight with pregnancy or you fight with puberty, you're going to lose that battle.
Yeah.
Right. But if we open to it, like I've met, so many moms, it's like they look at being pregnant as this wonderful, incredible, this beautiful thing that's ever happened to them. But then other moms who contract around it and it's just like, my life is ruined. It's like, and then they have so much difficulty just in relationship to it. Now, either way, I just want to be clear here. Either way, there's still going to be some immense growing pains, of course, but it can be a heck of a lot easier if there's some realization of spaciousness and just the ability to open, instead of the unconscious movement to just contract around something we don't understand. Now, again, for a lot of people, especially a lot of people I've worked with, is they say like, I didn't ask for this thing and it just woke up in me. And I understand that, like, and for some people, they're not trained spiritually. So like, they don't know what the heck is going on. And my heart goes out to them. And I've worked with a lot of folks with that. But at some point, we have to be the adult in the room and say, this is happening. Mm-hmm. And so I can either kind of like get with the program, or I can just be the unconscious one who fights with the program. And I've always just had this understanding, God is the boss. I'm going to listen to the boss. I'm going to go with the flow of the boss. I'm going to go with God's program, the boss's program. Because to fight with the boss, like to fight with God, we're going to lose that. We're going to lose that battle. Yeah.
Fascinating. So we share some things in common. I didn't spend any time in person with Adya, but his teachings, like for you, opened up this spaciousness in me. Yeah. I was able to tap into the ground of being, the field of awareness.
Yeah.
Now looking back at my journey, based on what you shared, I see that I spent about 8 years cultivating that space prior to then this awakening happened, the Kundalini awakening happening. And so I think though I had a difficult time, as most people do, it wasn't as hard. Like you said, some people can get a little
Yeah.
nutty when they don't have access to that spaciousness. But
Yeah.
immediately when I understood what was happening, I fell back on my foundation of accessing the meditative spaciousness, and I allowed all of this to unfold. And in my work with supporting others, I don't always emphasize that spaciousness, because at least for me in the first part of my journey, I used that as an escape. It
Yeah.
became a field where I went to bypass a lot. So
Yeah.
how do we find the balance between sharing that spaciousness, but also ensuring that we still keep people in the world and not lost in that, or, stuck in
Yeah.
a sort of disconnected awareness, ungrounded?
Yeah. 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 That's a beautiful question. So one of the things that I discovered, like when I first opened to that space, that it was immense, there was great freedom, it was transcendent, it was euphoric. I just felt like I was floating, for 6 or 9 months,
Yeah.
like on the best drugs ever. Is what I mean, beyond drugs, of course, but the thing about reality, like just say physical reality, and I had a family, um, like when you have kids, when you have kids, you have to support. You can only transcend so much. It's just like, and so, just after a number of months, what I began to feel is like all kinds of unconscious pain coming forward. The Kundalini, of course, was coming forward. My kids were pulling on me. Life was pulling on me. And, instead of forgetting about the space, what I did was, it wasn't necessarily that I did it, but it was like I kept opening to the spaciousness, but I also kept opening to the world. And then the spaciousness came down into my heart, and then later down into my hara. And what it manifested as is this immense peace and sanity and spaciousness in the midst of life. And so I was never really one who could pull off transcendence in a way that was well, let's just say either deeply transcendent or deeply spiritually bypassing.
Right.
Like it is almost like the transcendent was here, but it was here in the world, in the midst of my life, in the midst of my experience. It had to be like it had to be, because the demands of my life on me were just too much. I can't bypass my kids. I'd have to be a sociopath to do that. I have too much love for my kids. And then, just saying that word love, what happened is there was peace here. And I just knew, oh, like the next step on the journey is the realization of love in form, in matter, in life, in relationship to the inner world and the outer world. And then the great question for me was, how do I be free in the world in relationship to my family? I mean, my life was such a disaster at the time. Like I was going through a divorce. It's like, how do I be in love and free with this most tragic experience of like my family falling apart, my life falling apart, myself falling apart, just everything falling apart? And it forced me to open to this immense compassion. And so, like, I like to teach in 3 ways: realization of peace, the realization of love, the realization of strength. The realization of strength that actually comes through a total willingness to love and to be with everything that is difficult. And so if we circle back to that nightmare, it's like, well, can I love this nightmare? Can I love it fully and completely? Can I open to it fully and completely? Because if we look at like the hardwiring of the ego, is just this basic response of fight and flight. We could throw in freeze there too, but it's basically like we chase after things we want, we run away with that which we don't want. That's the primary veil that veils our consciousness. That's the primary obstacle to freedom. And again, my number one question was, what does it mean to be free? And because I wasn't living in a monastic life in this lifetime, it was, I need to be free in this world, in the tragedy of life, and the beauty of life, and the wonder of life, and the chaos of life. And that required immense love, like unconditional love and unconditional strength. And so that awakening, it just kept, like it started off in this very transcendent sense, but then it was just like going down into matter. Now, of course, Kundalini, so those are all non-dual awakenings, awakening to space, awakening to unconditional love, awakening to unconditional strength, like the strength of Buddha nature. Simultaneously, that flow of Kundalini was bringing forward every unconscious desire, confusion, heartache, trauma, pain, attachment, and so that's the beauty of Kundalini, is Kundalini really is not a force of transcendence. So Kundalini really balanced things and made it so I wasn't just going to transcend and, forget about life on planet Earth. It was more, like that old saying that Ken Wilber used, this transcend and include, transcend and include, transcend and include, which really meant love more deeply and fully and unconditionally and open to everything that is here. And the thing with Kundalini is you can't run from it. You can't just meditate it away. It's in you. It is you. It's the fabric of what's, what your consciousness is. And it brings forth all the unconscious out of you. And so there's no bypassing.
Right.
And to me, like I just saw just like from a space of clarity, bypassing is just another dance of ego. And that's not a movement of freedom. And so I wasn't interested in that.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I remember being caught up in the spacious awareness. And then when Kundalini came, it was very humbling because I had to humble myself and say, okay, well, I've got to address all of this stuff in my body, painful stuff, emotional stuff, physical stuff, worldly stuff.
Yeah.
So that brings me to another question. You spoke about a couple teachers so far. Did either David or Adya speak to you explicitly about this force called Kundalini? I know in Adya's work, it's not as apparent as it is in, say, your work, for example. So was this terminology that they were sharing with you? Were they speaking about Kriyas? Did they let you know what to expect? Or was it more just more abide as spaciousness, whatever arises, let it arise? How was their approach?
Yeah. What Ajay I could speak about real easy. He was just kind of like an older brother with me. And he was like, yes, I've been through that. It is really crazy. You're going to be fine.
Right.
And so like the big things that he gave me was just this sense of like, hey, you're going to be fine. Keep opening. And it wasn't even so much of what he said, but just knowing, that like oftentimes, like this may sound disrespectful, but like often I just think of Aji as a brother and I look at him like a boy. Like my teacher was kind of like an old man. When I look at Aji was just like a young guy. He was like, maybe 10, 15 years older than me. And I just kind of looked at him like an older brother who was just like, hey, you're going to get through this. You'll be fine. And I saw it in his presence that he was totally comfortable and completely confident in me. Completely confident in me. And it wasn't like that he knew Craig Holliday in some like deep and intimate way. It was just, I think he just looked into my soul and he was just like, you're going to be fine. Like, it's funny because I like just looked at him as a boy and sometimes he'd look at me like, hey kid, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And I just had this connection with him and with his soul. Whereas when he said something, it just went in and it registered just like that. Now, I went to him numerous times and I was having kriyas and wildness and all this, and he just kind of would sit back and smile and just smile. And so he didn't give like, really thorough instruction about anything. It was more just this presence of you're going to be fine. And that's one of the things that I try to bring to all my students is this gentle reminder of like, hey, look, like the way I teach is God chose you. So if we think about this, the intelligence of the creator chose you. This is not a mistake. This is not a mistake. And the transmission, when it comes from someone who's awake, they see our life on this huge arena. They see it on the soul level. And so, like when we're awake, we see like whoever's coming to us, we see them as a soul. We see the soul's going to be fine. The ego, maybe not so much. Like the ego, probably not going to be fine. It's going to get its butt kicked. It's going to be confused. It's going to go through all kinds of things. Ultimately, if it's a true awakening, the person's going to face, some level of ego death, to some degree. I don't like that word so much, but there's going to be a massive ego transformation, an upgrading of consciousness. And that may be very uncomfortable. And, that's one of the things that Aj said to me. He's like, what did he say to me? He said, Craig, like this experience will be very inconvenient for your life. But then he said after that, he said, but like I wouldn't trade this for the world. And he looked at me and like he kind of like asked me like, in a sense, like, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah. Like I hear that. I wouldn't trade this for the world either. Like I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And so like we both kind of had this recognition together of like, this is a beautiful thing, even though it's very uncomfortable, very difficult. But that transmission was like, you'll get through this. You'll get through this. Now, my teacher, David, he had more like, I'm just going to use this word, like guru magic and guru powers. He could help me walk through all kinds of different realms of divinity, and he could touch a point on my back and it could release things and open things. And he worked with me, weekly, if not like at times, sometimes it was daily, where it was just, I was in his company. And even times when I wasn't in his company, like he'd call me on the phone, like, and I'd be in like a real dark place of consciousness. And he'd just call me and he'd be like, what are you doing right now? And just as soon as I heard his voice, I realized, oh my God, like I'm totally lost in some trauma vortex spiral. And just my teacher saying, what are you doing right now? Like it was almost like he was starting to straighten things out, within my subtle energetic body. He had amazing cities, my teacher, David. And so he supported me in so many ways. And, even with his great support, the awakening was still crazy difficult for a good part of, a decade, and very dramatic and very wild. And so, I kind of smile because I had such good support, from my teachers. And, I realized like, oh yeah, like, of course, now it's my job, to give that back to people struggling. And I can't even imagine like when people come to me and they don't have a teacher, I'm just like, what the hell are you doing? Like some people try to get through it without a teacher. And I'm just like, you're crazy. Now I know there's a lot of, I'll be polite here, confused teachers out there about Kundalini. There's a lot of gurus who awaken it. And then, it's like, whatever, they live in India and you live in New York. And it's like, you're not going to get much support from them, or you don't even speak the same language. And so, that's the job that was basically given to me was, it's like, okay, now you're going to meet with all these people. A lot of them came to me through just some silly video I made, however many years ago that was. And that video, I didn't even think was even that good, but it's just the title of it. Just woke a lot of people up and realized, yes, this is a nightmare and I do need support. And, one way or another, God connected me with that. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, I mean, that was the question that I was planning to ask you was, how important is the presence of a teacher in your life? Can
Yeah.
we get through this without one? I personally, I don't think so. I've had many teachers that I've worked with, and sometimes you recognize that it's time to move on and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I definitely couldn't have got through this on my own. On your website, I saw you also mentioned Matt Kahn had also offered you a lot of teachings and wisdom. Myself as
Yeah.
well. It was through Matt Kahn that I was able to understand the importance of unconditional love.
Yeah.
His teaching, loving what arises, and that's very radiant in you is the love, is the open-heartedness, um, which it seems to be a little bit absent from traditions like Zen, like say Adya's background. Very loving
Yeah.
guy. You can tell he's looking at you without judgment, but
Yeah.
the ooey gooey like that, it's not always present in some of those teachers.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
think this also has to do with why they don't openly discuss the things like energy and the chakras and this sort of thing? Is it just because all of that comes on its own, maybe goes on its own, but what stays is the foundation, and that's where they tend to focus? Um,
Yeah. I mean, I just think that, people are wired differently. I just give to the world as immense clarity and
right,
spaciousness. And that's a huge gift. Like Eckhart Tolle has, a similar kind of gift, a little bit different. Excuse me. For me, I had a lot of messiness in my life. I had a lot of confusion in my life. I had a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. And the only way that was going to heal was through love.
mm,
I also have just a deep and profound connection with the Christ energy. And of course, that is just immense love and compassion. To me, if we have a spiritual path that doesn't include love, that's actually a very dangerous path, very dangerous. In the most lighthearted sense, like if we have a path that doesn't include love, we can pray to spiritual bypassing, like you spoke about. On the flip side, like in the more darker, dangerous sides, like we can really become narcissistic and have a sense of like violence toward ourselves or toward the world if our path doesn't include love. I mean, to me, it doesn't even make sense to have a path
right.
that doesn't include love. And I'm kind of one of these people that's wired for, like, I need the full picture as it relates to the fullness of life. That's kind of like what, like the tagline for my teaching is fully human, fully divine. It's like, I want to be awake in the world. We're obviously in the world. We've incarnated into the world. We didn't incarnate into a monastery. So I need to know, how do we function in this world? And I can't function in this world without love. Like to me, it's like you miss just a huge aspect of your consciousness. If there's not love here, it's like, come on, And for me, like love isn't even like, I don't want to, pigeonhole love as like ushy gushy. Like love is a willingness to be with everything. So love, like my teacher used to say, like you cannot separate love and strength.
Mm,
And a lot of people they think when I'm talking about love, they just mean, oh, you feel euphoric and wonderful, blissful all the time. It's like, yeah, like that's love. But also love is a willingness to sit with yourself and hold yourself while you're in wretched pain and you have a crazy headaches and you haven't slept in a week and you're about to lose your mind, and to sit with that part of yourself that's about to lose your mind. And we respond with compassion. Now, of course, this isn't the ego responding with compassion. This is your highest nature as it's waking up. This is the movement, the very fabric of God, the fabric of grace, the fabric of life, waking up in you and as you, responding to your humanity. And that's where it's a spiritual awakening thing, as you see, oh, this love that I am is the fabric of all of life. And so if we're on a path that misses that, it's like, come on, what that kind of path is this? It's like, what kind of path doesn't have love,
Right.
Like it doesn't even make sense. And just like you need love, we need to have clarity, because if we don't have clarity, we can go crazy. And if we're going crazy, we're definitely not awake. We're definitely not free. And, in order to endure just like life here on planet Earth and everything that arises, and the willingness to embrace every aspect of our trauma and the pain and sadness and guilt and shadow and wound, there has to be immense strength. And so to me, like, that's like, the trifecta here, the Trinity is, it's this awakening of head, heart, and gut. And Ajahn does teach that, of course, and I think any good teacher is going to have some, we need to teach, like a sense of non-dual clarity, spaciousness, unconditional love, and then unconditional strength, like an indestructibility, because like on the flip side, like if we have tremendous fear within us, well, I mean, that's a real hallmark that we're not awake. It's just like, what's all this fear? What am I running from? And so we have to have the strength to face all that fear as well.
Hey. So teachers necessary.
Oh yeah, I'm
necessary.
please forgive me. You got the question, was the teacher necessary? Yeah, they're so necessary. They're so necessary. It's like anytime I see someone try to go through it alone, what I see is a couple things. Almost always there's a fierce independence in that individual, and that independence almost always is arising out of trauma. Out of trauma. And there's some level of, this will sound harsh, almost everyone on planet Earth is an egomaniac. But like when we have fierce independence as like our thing, it's like we're afraid to open up, we're afraid to be seen. Like, it's funny because like sometimes I have people, they come to me and they tell me, they show everything, which is like the right thing to do. Some people come to me and they try to hide like all their stuff. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? Like that's the whole point of being with the teacher, is to allow yourself to be seen, allow yourself to be heard. We're going to meet it with love. And, people, because they've had bad parents, bad coaches, bad support, because they've been burned by life, they've identified with their ego, which says, don't trust, don't open up, don't share, don't be vulnerable. And again, like, these are all just veils. These are all just ego programs, and they're not the path. Like, that's not the way forward. That's not the way. And so, we have to really be honest. If we have that thought, I don't need a teacher. If we have a thought, I don't want a teacher, like, where is that thought arising from? Like a fundamental lack of trust? Or even like, I could look at it from a compassionate place and say, you've probably been burned really bad. But, like, the great question is like, if we've been burned really bad, do I align with the ego and shut down now and forever? Or, do I courageously open my heart and try again and develop skills of discernment and, really look like, oh, like maybe I was with the wrong teacher. Maybe my teacher had a gaping wound and shadow. Maybe I was seduced because my teacher had 10,000 students and had cities, and he looked or she looked like they had it all together. And, really they were a charlatan, and I was duped, and I'm not willing to admit, that I gave my power away or whatever it is. And so, and another way I'll admit, there's not really that many good Kundalini teachers. And so it's like a beautiful thing, like this gift that your platform is doing, is connecting people, with true teachings, with helpful teachings, with supportive teachings, and, kind of pop the bubbles of like that old yogic myth of, you sit down and you meditate and energy flows through all 7 chakra centers, then you're enlightened and you float away on a bliss cloud. It's like, okay, like that's probably not how it works. Like for everyone. So like, the gift of your platforms, you shed light on like what's actually happening. What's the process actually like? What teachings are really supportive, for the Western psyche? Is it like that old storybook myth, that the yogis taught? Is it like the yogic science of Kundalini awakening? Or, how about I tell you the truth? Like,
Mm.
how about I tell you the truth and not, just give you a Shakti pot and send you on your way and,
Right.
see what happens, So it's important. I don't want to say it's important to have a teacher. It's important to have a good teacher.
The teacher.
It's important to have a good teacher. And this is something I have struggled with is over the years, like I am ridiculously busy. When I refer people, away, like I used to refer people to Bonnie Greenwell, but she went to heaven. So it's like, it's hard to find good people, who are grounded, who are sane, who are supportive. I mean, there's some real charlatans out there. And there's also just some people who are well-intentioned, but have like a little bit of a narcissistic flavor, and they like to play with energy.
Mm.
And there's a lot of that out there, in the tantric, yoga, Bali, Kundalini world, just like awakening. There's a lot of the YouTube world of like, come to my Shakti pot and afterwards I'm going to try to get you naked and this and that. It's like all kinds of messiness that I've heard about. And that's really unfortunate too, because, Kundalini wakes up, and if the individual wakes up and hasn't done their work or isn't doing their work, it can really flow into narcissistic tendencies, kind of cult leader tendencies, messiah tendencies, superheroes, superhuman savior tendencies, and just some people just really get off on playing with power.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I've had a lot of students come to me who, they're afraid of teachers because, they've been used and abused and hurt and this and that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all really unfortunate. I experience people like that as well. I also encounter people who have a very fresh awakening who say, I'm ready to start sharing
Yeah.
this with others. And
Yeah.
I try to say, give it some time,
Yeah.
in a few
Yeah.
years at least.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I know you've also are one of the founders of the Association for Spiritual Integrity,
Yeah.
whose intention is to prevent this type of dare we
Yeah.
say, abuse or neglect or misuse of power. So that's another great contribution that you've made to this field of spirituality overall, which I am very grateful for.
Well, that was something that it was just heartbreaking for me because I had such great teachers, like who just had so much integrity and so much, they gave me so much support and they were just so clean. And then, when I began teaching, I worked with so many students from other traditions, and they came to me and they were telling me what their teachers had done to them. And I was just like, oh my Lord, like this is horrific. Horrific. I mean, teachers, I mean, I, there's there's a couple teachers who like assault women and are actively teaching. I'm like, what crazy world do we live in? And so I couldn't just sit back and just keep hearing these stories. Eventually I said, okay, I'm going to start an organization with my friend Rick and Jack, and to help educate teachers, just give them some basic grounds of ethics and training, how to interact with students in a way that's clean, that doesn't have power games, that's not narcissistic, that's just, very similar to how, a professional, psychotherapist, psychologist works. And of course, I have like that training as a background. I have a master's in counseling psychology, and so I thought like so much of this could be solved if just teachers had some basic ethics and some basic understanding of how to work with another human being without causing harm. And so, yeah, I started that organization many years ago, and worked there for a long time. And then I had to step away because just my students were demanding so much of my time. And so, but Rick and Jack are still really active in that. And a number of other teachers are. But yeah, that was one of my contributions, just because I saw like it's good to have some basic training
Mhm.
just in how to do this thing, how to do this thing. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but so often it's men preying upon women. And it's just like, oh my God, like this story is so old and it's so unnecessary. And just a little bit of ethics. I'm just like, I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to keep my desires in check, and that, and with money, it's like people get in so much trouble, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate,
Right.
when that happens. And so, if you choose to work with a teacher, you want to make sure they have good grounded ethics. You want to make sure they have their feet on planet Earth. And just like if you just take a peek around a little bit, and again, I hate to talk in this way, but I'll just be a little blunt. Just like take a little peek and see, are they sleeping with all their students? Are they charging exuberant rates and that type of thing? Like, are they trying to be the superstar, the Hollywood, kind of guru? Gee, like what's really going on here? And the big thing is like just to trust your gut
Mm.
when you see that, to have a lot of discernment with the teacher, and because it can be dangerous, messy business, but on the flip side, it can be so utterly healing and
Yes.
supportive. It can be the difference between life and death for some individuals,
Yeah.
of just like going into just like bipolar schizophrenia mixed with Kundalini, or, oh, like this is a really powerful awakening that I'm having. And I'm so happy to have this good teacher and this good song. And, I have, a supportive system to help me with what God is awakening within my consciousness.
Right. So you mentioned how you're a psychotherapist and you're trained in ethics. I'm actually a grad student studying psychotherapy myself as well, and
Yeah.
you're actually one of the inspirations that let me know, hey, this maybe is the right direction to move in. Craig's doing
Yeah.
great work. What I
Yeah.
found in Western psychology was that maybe they're off about some things compared to the East, but the
Yeah.
ethics, they have that down for the most
Yeah.
part.
They have the ethics. They have the ethics down. They're good with like say like somatic trauma healing, like that whole realm. The funny thing they did, like 20 years ago, is a lot of them just like stole so much Buddhist psychology and
Yeah.
called it, mindfulness psychology or something, and so there's that. But with any system, you take what's good, and like the thing that the modern age is demanding, like if you're going to be a teacher or support person, one, of course, you have ethics, but two, that you're well trained and you know how to work with a complete human being. And
Mm.
if you have a background in psychology, like you know how to work with the mind, you know how to work with the emotional nature, and even just from like a perspective of spiritual awakening, these are the primary veils: the mind and the emotional nature, the primary veils to non-dual awakening or Kundalini awakening. Like you need to know how to work with the mind. You need to know how to work with the emotional nature. If not, you're going to be a hot mess. And so
Right.
like that's a great gift for you as a teacher, that you're going to give to your students is, knowing how to work with these things. Yeah. Yeah. And you'll find like there's a lot of things that I just like in my psychological training where it's just like, okay, like that's one level of understanding. Like that's this level. My teacher's giving me this level. I'm going to stay with this level. But, I might just work with, just a couple of the little, the psychological healing techniques that they use. And I'm going to, bring that into my teaching arena. Yeah.
Right. So I'm curious about in your practice, your counseling practice, do you work almost exclusively with people in spiritual process?
Oh
Or
yeah, yeah, 100%. Like almost everyone I work with is a student of mine, or like becoming a student, or just curious, or um. So like I don't work with like people who just say, hey, I have anxiety.
Right.
I did in the beginning, of course. I worked with, I worked with like legitimate mental illness. And that's actually very helpful with Kundalini because you can see, okay, this is legitimate schizophrenia. This is legitimate bipolar disorder. And this is legitimate Kundalini.
Mm.
And this is Kundalini with schizophrenia. This is Kundalini with bipolar. Because sometimes people will come to you. Like if you're in this department, like there's going to be some people that send you an email at 2 a.m. and they're in some bipolar manic episode and they think they have Kundalini. And it's just like sometimes I have to tell people, no, this doesn't seem like Kundalini. This is actually bipolar.
Mm.
But almost everyone that God brings to me, is a Kundalini person. Is a Kundalini person. I've even had some real interesting ones where I've had people come to me with like chronic depression. And I work with them for a year. They like keep showing up. And I'm like, God, why are you sending me this person? Like, it doesn't make sense to me because they just keep showing up with intense resistance and depression. And then all of a sudden they're having a non-dual Kundalini awakening. And I'm just like, oh, okay, it makes sense. it makes sense. But that's happened, a handful of times. But most everyone who comes to me has had non-dual awakening or Kundalini awakening or both, or some realm of that, or deeply interested in the spiritual path or the teachings is the
Fascinating.
people I work with. Yeah.
Yeah, we find the right people at the right times, right teachers at the right times. I guess in your case, the right
Yeah.
students at the right
Yeah.
times as well. So, Craig, you've been doing this work for a long time. You've you said your journey began around 14, meditation. You met your teacher.
Yeah.
You're supporting so many people. What is your experience like today? What's your edge, if you have one? What is your current area in which you're growing as a human being?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've come fully to the end of the awakening process. No, I'm just messing with you. Yeah, no, of course, like we all have a growing edge. We all have a growing edge. And like that was the old myth is you get to some final endpoint. And like a big part of the teaching that came to me from my teacher David, and I think this is just happening in the modern age, is we've become to really realize that we are a part of an evolutionary world. And when you know that, like when you see that just like in the framework of consciousness, you see that consciousness is always growing, always growing. And so like, almost every day there's something that's coming forward that's arising out of either my unconsciousness, so whether it's like pre-verbal childhood trauma, that's just kind of just like gently simmering and coming to the surface. Like I have that, that type of thing. I have, this is really interesting. My teacher used to warn me about this, but when you become a teacher, like on a real scale, like you start to work with, like, say, the karma of other individuals. You work with like the karma of the Sangha. And so like there's all kinds of things come to me that I'm just like, I don't know what this is. Like this isn't mine. Like it's either like the karma of one of my students, like some signs I know, okay, this is from this student and I'm working with it a little bit. Sometimes it's, oh, this is within just like the field of the Sangha. Sometimes it's within the field of my community. I mean, heck, this last night I was working with like just something that's going on in this current excuse me, this current war with Israel and Palestine, like some just immense trauma and pain and confusion was coming through. And please keep in mind when I say I was working with it, it's more accurately like God is working through this one. And it's just like things are unraveling and I'm witnessing it, breathing a sense of love into it, just holding it. But it's almost like God is holding the character Craig and the character Craig is holding this and God is holding it all. And so it just feels like this massive unfoldment. And to me, like, I don't really look at my awakening as any different than the awakening of the world or the awakening of other human beings. Like, I don't care whose trauma it is. Like, if it's mine, if it's yours, if it's, like again, like if I feel into what happened last night, it was like this family, in Palestine, just dealing with like some kind of border crossing. And it was just like this energy of just like division, arises within my consciousness, and I work with it. And I'll tell you this, like, that happens a lot with me. Now, all of it is arising in a space of spaciousness and bliss and freedom. But the thing my teacher said, and like a lot of people think of this as shocking, but it's like we wake up and we become a slave to God.
Mm.
It's not like we wake up and like, oh, I'm free and I'm euphoric and it feels like I'm on drugs all the time. Like, there's that. Like the experience of my conscious, like my experience of the conscious is incredible. But it's also filled with immense darkness that I am just witnessing the transmutation of within this body. And I'll say this, it's not easy. Like, it's not just some flowery Kundalini awakening and there's an enlightenment here and it's just lovely and transcendent and, I'm just floating in my own world. Like, I knew this just as a kid. It's like I've just always been open to the work of God. And I kind of see that, like, that as we awaken together, we become like these giant, like, transmutation machines that, like, God just uses us to transmute darkness. And again, I don't want anyone to hear that, like, I'm doing this personally. Like, there's definitely a personal experience here, an individual experience, not like it used to be. But, this job is, it requires a Christ-like love, an immensity of being. And again, I don't want anyone to think I'm claiming any credit for that, because I cannot. It was more like just something was just like thrown into my lap, thrown into my experience. And I'm like, okay, I want to just keep breathing into this thing. And so it's a very paradoxical experience that I have of feeling free, experiencing great freedom, experiencing bliss, and then just being open to all of this stuff that just moves through me. And again, like, just from a perspective of like a Buddhist perspective of no self, there is zero care within me about whether it's mine, yours, whoever's. If there's something here, it's met with love. And that's just the bottom line. That's the bottom line. So there's all that's going on. And then, of course, that just like if we just spoke purely about, say, non-dual realization or Kundalini awakening, like the Kundalini, it just flows like this channel. I just feel like as this river that's just always here flowing. When it first woke up, like I said, it caused me to have all these seizures and kriyas and all this craziness. That whole hugeness is still here. It's just flowing unobstructed. And so, like, that's just like a non-dual river that's flowing in the background. That's so immense. Like, if I feel into it, I have to be careful, because like I'll just start going into samadhi states. I have to like step away from that, because I'll get it just makes it so my mind doesn't work, and so I have to be
Right.
careful with that.
I understand.
And so I have realms that, like, I have realms I could step into, just like I'm pointing out right there. And then there's times when just God will just come into me and just download some huge new thing. And sometimes it's a new samadhi state. Sometimes it's like a different quality of bliss. Sometimes it's just like some realm of fire, that helps with the transmutation and be helpful to one of my students or to my sangha. So it's constantly growing and changing and unfolding. And that's the beauty of it, is it's just this like unfolding mystery. And that's part of being free. Because some teachers get stuck, and that's was my little joke there. Is like, I'm totally awake and this is it. And that's like it. And it's like, okay. And that may be true for that individual, that they're totally awake in this one realm. But what God has shown me, and that's one of the things that Kundalini shows us, is yes, there are these like 3 great realms of non-dual awakening, but there's like 1,000,001 realms that keep opening, keep unfolding, that are helpful and supportive for life here on planet Earth, that are helpful for humanity. Like, God is not a static thing. God is a static thing, but God is also growing and evolving just eternally. And so I have all kinds of things. And sometimes, like, God will just open me into something, and that experience will be there for a day, a month, a year. It'll be there forever. Sometimes things come and go, but often what I see is like worlds open up, and then those worlds integrate, and then they're transmitted into the sangha. And the beautiful thing about it is, like, the way I look at this experience is, I'm the first receiving student of it all. Because one of the traps, again, like with awakening, is I'm the awakened one. I know everything. And to me, I don't hold that as a view. It's more like I feel like a little kid, and like new things are being taught to me all the time. And in the past, like, I had these great teachers that I'd meet with, and now it's just like my questions are answered and the experience is given even before I even know to ask the question, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's quite wild. And I will say, just like from a human practical perspective, well, I'll say 2 things from a human practical perspective. Like, one, of course, I've got an evolving edge. Like, I'm always learning to be a better father, better partner, better listener, just whatever it is, better human being. I practice jujitsu, and like, like that's kind of like my fun, like, human edge. I rock climb, and I practice like with these incredible professionals. It's one of the things in my life. I've always been a gift of just like, somehow I just get aligned with people who are masters in whatever it is that that I'm doing. And so that's fortunate. So like, I get to totally be an amateur and learn from these giants, just in like real life, practical human things. And then also I'll say, just like with my family, from one sense, like, people think, well, when someone's awake, they're going to be like some kind of perfected human being. It's not that way at all. It's like, my family has to tolerate me, because I'm a human being who can't remember anything. Like, I don't have much of a memory, and I'm a different kind of human being. And so, like, my family life, like, they are always challenging me. They're like, what's going on with you? Because sometimes God will put me in a samadhi state, and it's time to go to the farmer's market. It's time to drive the kids somewhere. It's time to pack lunches, and I'm dropping the ball in every department. And so, like, what's my growing edge there? It's like, can you be fully grounded and be going through like these huge experiences at the same time? And I'll tell you, Brent, like, I drop the ball constantly. I screw up constantly. I get things mixed up constantly. And that's good for people to know, because sometimes we project too much on teachers, And also with Kundalini or just spiritual traditions, we have this idea that I'm going to get to a place where I no longer feel pain and everything in my life is perfect. And I'm a millionaire and whatever. And it's just like, this is an evolutionary world. And so like your question is like, what's your evolving edge? It's like, it's massive in every department. It's like, and that's how I think all human beings should be, is like, we realize like, oh, I have so much that I could grow into in every different way. Like there is no ultimate complete. The desire for ultimate complete, like that's the ego's desire, just to get to a place where we no longer feel pain or no longer have to work or do anything.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because, of course, some people hear about Kundalini or they hear that they're in the process and they think one day,
Yeah.
like you said, they'll be the
Yeah.
perfected millionaire, healthy without any issues. And
Yeah.
we have Craig here who's been through a
Yeah.
lot and he's saying, hey,
Yeah.
still growth is happening. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think it,
Yeah.
it gives permission to teachers to be human so that they can teach
Oh
from a
yeah.
human place,
Yeah.
as well as permission to the student to also be human, right?
Yeah, well, and like if we just look at this world, like this, like the earth plane is an evolutionary plane. So just like I was teaching before, like if we have a thought that I'm going to have a spiritual path without love, like that's a crazy, excuse my language, but like that's a crazy effed up perspective that we can have a path without love. And also, if we have a thought that we are going to live in a world without growth or get to a point where growth doesn't exist, that's crazy. Like that's like almost like a narcissistic or sociopathic viewpoint. It's just, it's no connection to reality. This world is an evolutionary world. Growth will go on in the earthly plane forever for
Right.
every human being. And to think that we get to an endpoint is not to be in reality. Is not to be in reality. Now, I want to be clear. We can open and awaken to ultimate states of consciousness. But this thing, like this human body, this human psyche, this thing is going to grow forever. And that's the beauty of when you study psychology, that's just like a given. You're just like, of course, like psychology is always growing, always growing. Yeah, even just human potential is always growing. Like sometimes I'll go on Instagram and I'll just see people doing like triple backflips on a mountain bike or a motorcycle. I'm like, oh my God. When I was a little boy, I was like Evil Knievel on a dirt bike jumping like a school bus. And now like just the things that people like, just what human beings are doing. And I have friends who run 200 miles like in one, like in one session. I don't know what you call that. One run is they'll run for 200 miles, like an ultra endurance athlete. 100 years ago, we didn't think that was possible.
Right.
Like, and so just like the being of this thing that we are, it grows in every way. And like a conversation I've had with Rick Archer in regards to like Rick's often gets this question, is like, it appears that the evolution of consciousness is speeding up and more normal human beings are waking up. And so like this evolution is happening on the level of spiritual awakening. It's also happening on the level of body. It's just like, it's so amazing. This world we live in is so incredible. What's possible, if we can get out of that animal consciousness and stop blowing each other up, if we can meet each other with love, like that, so much more would be available to us all. So anyways, well, anything else, my friend, or any
I,
other
I've
big
just got
things?
just one question, just
Yeah.
to segue off you just shared here, and then we'll begin to wrap up. So you mentioned, the evolution of consciousness is speeding up. Have you noticed since you began teaching, or even since maybe prior to teaching, have you noticed students are coming to you and resolving things quickly, more quicker than before? Are there new trends that are serving this accelerated awakening, like YouTube, like online
Yeah.
sanghas? Have you noticed
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
in your teaching?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, just even just in my lifetime, it's like, my God, when I was young, my teacher was just given to me, but I couldn't imagine just being in like Nebraska and wanting a spiritual teacher. It's like, what the heck are you gonna do? But now, like any kid in Nebraska can just click on YouTube, and in half a second, they've got all the world's greatest teachings right there on YouTube. And that's, I mean, that's the gift. And see, when we step way back and just look at life, you see that there is this massive download of divine intelligence, the energy of awakening. It's putting a massive pressure on planet Earth, and yeah, it's happening. It's happening. I think, like, of course, YouTube, of course, the internet, online sanghas absolutely have sped things up. And then a big thing that I think has been so utterly helpful is, this sounds a little silly, but just like trauma therapy.
Mm,
Trauma therapy has really helped human beings get real about what are my veils, like what are the big veils in my consciousness, and to be able to see through them, to be able to heal those, to actually begin to integrate and do that healing work. And it's like trauma is a household word now.
yeah.
Mindfulness is a household word. Yoga is a household word. Meditation is a household word. Like in, let's say, like, who knows when I started the path, let's say like 1986 or whatever. Like mindfulness, people would be like, huh? Like meditation? Like what?
Yeah.
Or like people might have an idea of meditation, but they might not even know anyone who's ever meditated before. But it's like, it's funny because uh like I've worked with soldiers, like let's say like Green Berets or SEALs, this type of thing, who, like mindfulness and yoga are like a normal part of their life. And here they are, it's like they're trained killers. And just think of that integration of, that the military is teaching, is teaching yoga, teaching trauma therapy. And um, that awakening has has become so utterly practical, through and throughout society. Now, I think it's still rare to find people who are actually truly awake and truly embodied. But from a big perspective, I can see like the world is waking up, the world is growing, the world is learning to heal and embrace their pain and their wound and their shadow, and have some level of understanding of their innate divinity. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing compared to, let's say, 1950.
Oh yeah.
Like a huge thing compared to 1920. That's 100 years ago. And so it appears like we are growing at an exponential rate now. Like when I first started teaching, when I asked people, like about their shadow, their wound, their trauma, a lot of people were still doing that non-dual bypass that you were speaking about. They were like really rooted in that non-dual bypass. And now not many people are doing that anymore. They see, okay, like, of course, that's not the truth. Of course, that's not the truth. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We're living in very exciting times, and
Yeah.
it gets me more excited for the future as well, to see how parabolic this
Yeah.
acceleration of consciousness can go. It's very exciting. So Craig,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. It's been a great conversation. Once again, I want to thank you for your work in general. You're really helping a lot of people, and I hear it all the time. I hear a lot of praises for
Yeah.
Craig Holliday. So thank you. Thank you so much. Let our audience know where they can connect with you if they would like to find out about your meetings on Zoom, your consultations, to find your books, your
Yeah.
workshops,
Yeah.
retreats.
Yeah. Yeah. It's real easy. It's just my name. It's just craigholiday.com. And my last name, Holiday, has two L's in it. And so just Google craigholiday.com. And I think it's Craig Holliday on YouTube. And so it's just my name. So pretty simple. And I do all kinds of stuff. I do 3 groups a week. And then I try to teach an online retreat every 2 months, every 6 weeks or 2 months. And then a couple times a year, I'll do them in person. I was teaching a bunch in person before COVID, and then COVID kind of got everyone online. And I think we all got so comfortable online, but I'll still do some in-person retreats as well. But I have like a retreat coming up next weekend, November 3rd through 5th. I don't know if this will be out before then, but if people just sign up on the mailing list, and, if they listen to any of the YouTube videos, especially the current ones, I'm always announcing what I'm doing. So I've got a Kundalini support group on Wednesday mornings. I got a meditation a Wednesday night, and then Sunday night I do a satsang. And I do those. I'm a very consistent person, is one of the things my teacher taught me, is just like, we show up every week. So I'm always teaching. And then, I do these retreats as well. Yeah. And so I'm a fan of, if you find something and you like it, just connect to it. And we show up. Like, I was with my teacher 20 years, and it was like, I would go a whole year without missing a single meditation with him. So it's just like consistency. And that's so helpful for people on this path of Kundalini awakening, when it's so intense and so wild. It's just to have a good thing that you're connected to. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to take that to heart. If you look at my channel, it's a little inconsistent with the things that I put out, but this will be out before your upcoming retreats. And I invite anybody who's interested in connecting with Craig further. The links will be in the description, craigholliday.com. Craig, thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And
we'll thank you, Brent. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
You're so welcome. And thank you to our audience for spending some time with us. Appreciate you all. Much love.
Much love. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.